The spotlight has faded, but the secrets around Bill Cosby never died. Bill Cosby, once hailed as America's dad, was long considered the model of the ideal father for millions of Americans. But it was all just a carefully staged performance designed to conceal a devastating truth. A DNA test ignited the fire, exposing shocking secrets: an affair in the shadows, an illegitimate child never acknowledged, a $40 million extortion scandal that shook America. This was no longer a rumor. It was a bloodline tragedy torn open before the public eye. The symbol of America's dad in an instant collapsed into a shattered illusion. On January 25, 1964, Bill Cosby held the hand of Camille Olivia Hanks as they walked down the aisle. To the public, it was a golden marriage, a rising star of American television and an intellectual, elegant wife. There was a time when the name Bill Cosby rang out as an untouchable symbol. He was called America's dad. He was praised as a barrier breaker, a pioneer for black entertainers, a man who changed the way Hollywood treated black television. Bill Cosby's reputation seemed untouchable, unbreakable. He was a living legend, not only on screen, but off it as well. Cosby and his wife built what looked like the perfect family with 5 children. Each of their names began with the letter E, a kind of signature, a trademark of the Cosby household: Erica, Aaron, Ennis, Ensa, and Evan. But as his career soared and his family appeared, picture-perfect cracks began to form. A family once celebrated as a model of success now carried loss and shadows that would never sleep. The children with the letter E and the tragedies. Erica Cosby, the eldest daughter, kept her distance from her father. Born in 1965, Erica was Bill Cosby's first pride. She chose the arts, becoming a painter and lecturer. But when Cosby's scandals erupted, Erica nearly vanished from public statements. She built an invisible wall between herself and the name Bill Cosby. On canvas, she painted abstract tones, while in real life her silence became a cold declaration. The bond between father and daughter had become nothing more than distance. If Erica chose silence, the second daughter, Aaron Cosby, became the rebel. Born in 1966, Aaron never accepted the image of the perfect father. As an adult, she openly clashed with him, once accusing him of being controlling and distant. The media called Aaron the rebellious daughter of the Cosby family, and her rebellion, whether intentional or not, revealed cracks in what was once seen as an unshakable family wall. But the deepest tragedy in the Cosby family struck the third child, Ennis Cosby. Born in 1969, Ennis was the only son and the greatest hope of Bill Cosby. He once called Ennis the light of my life. Intelligent and kind, Ennis overcame dyslexia to study education, dreaming of becoming a psychologist to help children. But fate was merciless. On the night of January 16, 1997, while changing a tire on the side of a Los Angeles freeway, Ennis was murdered at just 27 years old. The news exploded like a bomb. American audiences were in shock. Cosby collapsed. The world saw Bill Cosby, the strong man on stage, weeping beside his son's coffin. The death of Ennis not only took away his only son, but also ripped apart the picture-perfect family Cosby had built for decades. And tragedy did not stop haunting the children whose names: Ensa Cosby, a cruel fate. Ensa, born in 1973, was the fourth child. When Bill Cosby was accused by dozens of women, Ensa was one of the few children who publicly defended him, declaring, "This is a witch hunt." But fate struck again. On February 23, 2018, Ensa passed away at the age of 44 due to kidney disease while waiting for a transplant. Her death left Cosby devastated. Once again, tragedy followed tragedy, as if destiny was determined to take away the children he loved. And Evan Cosby, the quiet youngest. Evan, born in 1976, was the youngest. When the storm hit, Evan tried to protect her father, writing on social media, "My dad is not a monster." Yet despite her heartfelt words, Cosby's public image had already plummeted. Evan's defense felt like a desperate attempt to rescue a name that was already irreparably stained. 5 children, 5 names beginning with the letter E, once thought to symbolize lasting happiness. But the reality was merciless. That family, once praised as eternal, became nothing more than a shattered emblem. And each letter E, instead of telling a story of joy, turned into a scar etched into the tragedy of Bill Cosby. The world thought the tragedies of the E family were already enough to extinguish the legend of Bill Cosby. But then came the cruelest twist of all. A young woman stepped forward claiming to be blood of his blood, a child Cosby had never acknowledged. Autumn Jackson, a bloodline mystery, and the $40 million extortion case. In 1997, when the name Bill Cosby still shone brightly across America, a scandal erupted like thunder on a clear day. Autumn Jackson, a 22-year-old woman, stepped before the media and made a claim that left Hollywood in stunned silence. "I am Bill Cosby's biological daughter." Who was Autumn Jackson? Born on September 20, 1974. Autumn Jackson was the result of an extramarital affair between Cosby and Shawn Thompson Upshaw, a woman who openly admitted she had a relationship with Cosby during the 1970s. Shawn did not hide it. She stated clearly that Bill Cosby was Autumn's father. What was shocking was that Cosby did not completely deny it. He admitted to having been involved with Shawn and even transferred more than $100,000 to provide financial support for Autumn over the years. He paid for tuition cars and even set up a trust fund for the daughter born outside his marriage. But with one condition: Autumn had to maintain at least a B average to continue receiving money. Cosby acted as though he was fulfilling a father's duty, but he withheld the most important thing of all official recognition. Autumn grew up in a state of limbo, supported yet denied, forced to live in the shadow of rejection. At 22, Autumn Jackson decided to break the $40 million extortion plot, a breathless script. It all began like a play carefully staged. Autumn Jackson was not alone. She and two accomplices, including her boyfriend Michael Bowers, and another friend, devised a daring plan to use bloodlines to bring down a legend. They calculated each step. They wrote threatening letters, stressing that Autumn was Bill Cosby's biological daughter. They threw out the figure of $40 million like a knife against his throat. They presented a choice: either Cosby paid to keep it quiet, or the whole world would learn the truth. The number 40 million was no accident. It symbolized an entire career, a reputation Cosby could not afford to lose. For with just one screaming headline, "Bill Cosby has a secret child," the image of America's dad would collapse instantly. Cosby faced a fateful decision. What did he do? He did not give in. Instead, he immediately contacted his lawyer and brought in the FBI. A legal trap was set, cold and merciless. Jackson and her accomplices had no idea. They thought they were in control, but every call, every letter was already being monitored by federal investigators. Every step Autumn took was like a fish caught on a hook. The more she struggled, the tighter the line drew. And then, just as Autumn believed she had forced Cosby into a corner, she fell straight into a federal sting, arrested and brought to trial on charges of extortion. The courtroom became a stage, but not the one Cosby had once ruled. The trial immediately drew nationwide attention. The press called it a $1 million family drama, where bloodlines and the law collided, turning Cosby's stage into a cold courtroom. The trial, when the bloodline secret was pushed aside at the federal courthouse in Manhattan in 1997, all eyes were on two figures: Bill Cosby, America's dad, sitting sternly in the front row with his powerhouse team of lawyers, and Autumn Jackson, the 22-year-old young woman who claimed to be his biological daughter. Yet the greatest paradox of the case lay at its very core. The federal court declared that the bloodline relationship between Autumn and Cosby was irrelevant. DNA evidence, the testimony of her mother Shawn Upshaw about her affair with Cosby, all of it was brushed aside, deemed unrelated to the extortion charges. The biggest question, was Autumn Jackson really Cosby's biological daughter, was left hanging like a ghost, hovering in the courtroom, but never answered. On sentencing day, the courtroom was silent. Autumn Jackson was handed 26 months in federal prison on 3 counts: conspiracy to extort, crossing state lines to commit extortion, and threatening to harm a reputation for profit. It was a sentence for an extortionist, but not an answer for a daughter. What shocked the public even more were the legal documents released in court. They revealed that Cosby had indeed provided financial support for Autumn over the years. He had paid for her tuition, set up a trust fund, and even bought her cars. But when Autumn dropped out of school in 1995, Cosby cut her off. So had Cosby helped her out of moral duty, or out of the responsibility of a father? He never gave a public acknowledgement. Everything stopped at the level of a wealthy man helping the daughter of a former lover. This half-truth turned Autumn into a symbol of tragedy, a woman who grew up on her father's money, but who never had the right to call him by the words dad. The DNA test, a truth buried. During the extortion scandal in 1997, Bill Cosby admitted he had given a blood sample for a paternity test. It seemed like a move that could silence all rumors and finally reveal the truth was Autumn Jackson truly his biological daughter. But then came the twist. Autumn Jackson refused to take the test. Without her sample, there was nothing to compare. Everything slipped into darkness. The truth just one step away from being revealed was buried. No DNA, no scientific proof, only two opposing cliffs remained: the denial of a man once admired by all of America and the accusation of a 22-year-old woman claiming to be his abandoned daughter. No one could ever say for certain whether Cosby was Autumn's father. The story dissolved into a whirlpool of speculation. To this day, that bloodline remains an open question, a secret neither Cosby nor Autumn ever fully chose or dared. The appeal, a reversal of fate. Autumn Jackson refused to accept the label of extortionist. After the 1997 trial, she and her lawyers immediately filed an appeal arguing that the original conviction had been clouded by ambiguity. And in a twist no one expected, in 1999, the federal appeals court overturned the verdict. The reason: a flaw in the jury instructions on extortion law. Specifically, jurors had not been properly told the difference between extortion and a legitimate effort to negotiate financial support from a biological father. That technicality was enough to change everything. Autumn walked free, spared from serving 26 months in federal prison. But her victory brought no redemption. The case left a scar that would never heal. In the eyes of the media, Autumn's image was set in stone. No one called her the daughter who sought justice. Everyone called her the girl who tried to extort Bill Cosby. One name, one case, one shadow she could never erase. The ellipsis, a tragedy, without end. The Autumn Jackson case was more than a legal scandal. It was an iceberg hidden beneath Bill Cosby's legacy. A man once celebrated as the model father, now accused by a young woman of being hers. A child raised on her father's money but never allowed to call him dad. A DNA test that was never made public, leaving a void filled endlessly by rumor and speculation. Meanwhile, inside Cosby's official household, tragedy had already struck the children whose names all began with E. Ennis, murdered Ensa, dead at 44. Aaron, rebellious Erica. Silent Evan, fighting in vain to defend her father. And now Autumn, the shadow child, twisting the perfect family portrait into something distorted, bloody, and tragic. After the Autumn Jackson shock, the cracks in the image of America's dad had barely begun to heal when a new wave of accusations erupted. This time, it was no longer about bloodlines. It was about secrets. The scandal storm that shocked the world. By the early 2000s, whispers began to spread through show business. Bill Cosby, the model father on screen, was in reality a dangerous predator behind the scenes. At first, only a few women came forward. The public shook their heads in disbelief, saying, "Impossible. This is Cosby we're talking about." Then in 2014, comedian Hannibal Buress stood on a stage in Philadelphia and delivered a biting line. "Yeah, but you were women, Bill Cosby, so turn the crazy down a couple notches." It was like a spark dropped into a barrel of gunpowder. Everything exploded. From 2015 to 2018, not one, not two, but more than 60 women came forward, each telling her story. All shared the same chilling pattern. Cosby offered them a drink, a pill, and then the nightmare began. What made it horrifying was that the testimonies stretched across decades, spanning the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and even into the 2000s. To the public, he still wore the smile of a gentle man preaching morality, lecturing about family responsibility. But behind closed doors, the testimonies painted him as a man who exploited power and fame for his own desires. The historic conviction. The breaking point came in 2018 when Cosby stood trial for assaulting Andrea Constand, a former Temple University employee. The courtroom was packed, the entire nation holding its breath. And then came the thunderbolt. Bill Cosby was found guilty and sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. In that moment, all the glory turned to ashes. America's dad, the symbol of the American family, collapsed before the eyes of millions. The return in 2021, free but with nothing left. In June 2021, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court unexpectedly overturned the conviction on procedural grounds. Cosby had previously struck a deal not to be prosecuted in a civil case. After nearly 3 years behind bars, he was released. But this was no victory. There were no cheers, no welcoming arms. To the public, Cosby was now nothing more than an aged, trembling shadow of a legend who had lost everything. The glory was gone, the reputation destroyed, and America was forced to confront a cold truth: America's dad had never truly existed. It had always been a role Cosby played far too well. If the courtrooms had stripped Cosby of his freedom, the tidal wave of public outrage had obliterated the legacy of America's dad that he had spent half a century. The aftermath of a fallen reputation. For decades, Cosby stood proudly on the stages of America's most prestigious universities, receiving honorary doctorates as symbols of his intellect, artistry, and moral example. He had once embodied the living proof of the American dream for Black America, a man who broke barriers, who became the family figure for millions of viewers. But when the abuse allegations surfaced, the same universities that once celebrated him turned their backs. Temple University, the institution Cosby had been tied to his entire life, was the first to revoke his honorary degree. Brown Tufts and a long list of others followed. Each revocation was like another nail hammered into the coffin of his legacy, a public declaration that this man is not worthy of the trust we once placed in him. The scene was cruel. Once Cosby had stepped onto those stages to thunderous applause, smiling as he was praised as a moral beacon for an entire generation. Just years later, those very same institutions coldly tore his name from their rolls of honor. The applause was gone. In its place, silence and rejection. Television networks stopped airing The Cosby Show. Posters came down. Memorial projects vanished. In the public eye, Bill Cosby was no longer America's dad. He was the embodiment of betrayed trust. The fame that had once lifted Cosby to the heights of power now dragged him down into disgrace. He lost everything: his career, the respect he had commanded, and even the legacy that had once seemed untouchable. The public thought Cosby's downfall would end with his honor stripped away. But no, that was only half the story. The rest was revealed in cold numbers: unpaid tax bills, homes on the verge of foreclosure, and a fortune that once gleamed, now reduced to a crushing weight of wealth and debt, a financial legacy in ruins. Bill Cosby once sat at the pinnacle of fame with an estimated net worth of around $400 million, a staggering figure that placed him among Hollywood's wealthiest. He owned properties stretching from Pennsylvania to California to New York, priceless art collections, and enormous revenues from The Cosby Show endorsements and syndication rights. To the public, Cosby was not only America's dad, but also a true mogul, a symbol of Black success. But when scandal erupted, that empire quickly crumbled. Revenue streams were cut off. Networks stopped airing. The Cosby Show advertising deals were canceled. The steady flow of money vanished. Cosby still had houses, paintings, and funds, but they now resembled castles built on sand, fragile against the cold reality of financial collapse. Golden properties turned into burdens. One of Cosby's symbols of wealth was his 6-story mansion on East 71st Street in Manhattan, valued in the tens of millions. Yet behind those gilded doors lay a financial nightmare: a massive $17.5 million mortgage still unpaid, along with more than $300,000 in overdue property taxes. The New York court officially listed the mansion as at risk of foreclosure, and it didn't stop there. Another Manhattan townhouse fell into litigation with Citi Mortgage after Cosby was accused of defaulting on a $4.2 million loan with about $3.7 million still outstanding. Once symbols of wealth, his prized New York properties became battlegrounds between Cosby and creditors fought dollar by dollar. On top of real estate woes, waves of civil lawsuits drained Cosby's finances further. Most notably, Judy Hughes accused him of assault in 1975. After years of legal battles in 2022, a court ordered Cosby to pay $500,000 in damages. And that was just one case among dozens, each dragging with it attorney fees, appeal costs, and endless legal bills. Reports suggested that the Cosby family was forced to sell valuable artwork, liquidate parts of his art collection, and even mortgage additional properties to cover mounting it. From fame and fortune to an empty-handed old man. Once upon a time, Bill Cosby was described as a man who could not fall. He had fame, fortune, and the love of the public. But now, with scandal, prison, and family tragedy crashing down all at once, what remains is nothing more than assets weighed down by debt. Cosby still owns properties in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, but instead of symbols of prosperity, they now stand like lonely fortresses surrounded by unpaid taxes, banks, and lawyers. It is a bitter irony. A man who once walked onto stages to the cheers of millions now walks into courtrooms under the scrutiny of the press. A man who once earned millions per season now struggles to keep his homes from foreclosure. The spotlight has gone dark. The assets may still stand, but the honor is gone. And for the public, there is no longer any difference between a millionaire and a man stripped bare. Bill Cosby has become the very symbol of collapse. And yet, despite mistakes the world calls unforgivable, one person has never left. The wife who never left, Camille Olivia Hanks Cosby. Camille entered Cosby's life on January 25, 1964, and has walked beside him for more than 6 decades. Their marriage has been a mirror reflecting every rise and fall from the days Cosby was hailed as America's dad, the #1 icon of American television, to the years he was disgraced, branded a monster behind a polished suit. Through it all, Camille never left. The most controversial part of their story is that Camille never abandoned him. When America erupted in outrage when universities stripped away his honorary degrees, when more than 60 women stood up to accuse him, Camille still defended him. She publicly stood by her husband, even condemning the U.S. legal system itself as a miscarriage of justice. During the years Cosby sat in prison from 2018 to 2021, many expected Camille to finally break or prepare for a sensational divorce. But instead, she vanished from the spotlight, retreating into their quiet Massachusetts home. No interviews, no public appearances. Behind that silence, however, were private prison visits, signs of a marriage that refused to break after half a century of storms. For some, Camille is a symbol of unwavering loyalty. For others, she is seen as a woman blind to the truth, clinging to the role of Bill Cosby's wife no matter the cost. William Henry Cosby Jr. in 2025 turned 88 years old, an age that might have marked fulfillment, a celebrated artist enjoying old age in luxury. But for Bill Cosby, it feels like the closing act of a tragedy where the spotlight has gone dark and only shadows remain. Bill Cosby. Today, a silent journey. After the spotlight. Since his criminal conviction was overturned and he was released in 2021, Cosby has disappeared from the screen. No more applause, no more laughter echoing through millions of American homes. The man once known as America's dad has retreated into silence. News about Cosby is no longer about roles or projects, but about health. Some reports claim he is completely blind, or at least has lost most of his vision. He is described as moving slowly, relying heavily on family and aides. Yet insiders insist for 88 he is doing fairly well. There have been no public reports of him suffering from terminal illness or being confined to long hospital stays. One certainty remains: Cosby rarely appears in public. Instead of confident strides on red carpets, he only surfaces briefly at small events or through statements read by his spokesperson. Each time the image is no longer of a legendary star, but of an elderly man, frail and out of place under the glare of the media. And yet even in silence, Cosby once again stirred headlines in 2025. When Malcolm Jamal Warner, the actor who played his son on The Cosby Show, tragically drowned, Cosby spoke out. He shared that they had kept in touch and that he considered Warner not just a colleague, but a student and a family member. Those words, brief as they were, brought back bittersweet memories of the golden era of a series that once ruled American television. But those memories were quickly overshadowed by harsh reality. The U.S. media continued to report on his financial struggles, labeling it a financial shadow that hangs over Cosby's legacy, erasing the glow of his once radiant fame. To the public, Cosby is no longer America's dad, but a toppled monument staggering under debts, lawsuits. Legacy, light and darkness. Bill Cosby leaves behind a legacy both radiant and stained. On one side, he was a pioneer. The Cosby Show 1984-1992 was not only a smash hit sitcom, but also a cultural turning point in America. It shattered stereotypes by placing a middle-class black family at the center of primetime television. Sociologists and media scholars hailed it as a leap forward in how Hollywood portrayed black characters. Cosby also blazed trails in education and academia. Before his honors were stripped, he held over 60 honorary doctorates from major universities and was seen as an intellectual icon for the black community. He donated tens of millions to scholarship funds, most notably a $20 million contribution to Spelman College in the 1980s, a historically black women's college. But on the other side, darkness consumed his legacy. After the allegations, nearly all honorary degrees were revoked. Scholarship funds and programs bearing his name were frozen or renamed. In 2015, Spelman College terminated the Cosby scholarships entirely. American popular culture was forced to confront a painful paradox. The sitcom that once taught an entire generation about fatherhood, marriage, and family values was created by a man accused of betraying those very principles. Today, Cosby's legacy is viewed as a divided sun, one half shining with the brilliance of art and social change, the other shrouded in the cold darkness of crime and betrayal of trust. Media critics call this the Cosby effect, the phenomenon where a cultural icon sets new standards only to break them, leaving behind a fracture that will never heal in the collective memory.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.